Salvete omnes. This is chapter 36, exercise C. We are to parse these English sentences and turn them into Latin. Sententia prima. You will never be able to see my friends if you do not run as quickly as possible. So here we have a sentence where it's a conditional. So you will never be able to see my friends ever, if you do not run as quickly as possible. So conditionals are broken up into the if part, which is called the protasis, the if you don't run as quickly as possible, and then there's the payoff, the apodosis, the thing that will happen if this comes to pass. If you do not run as quickly as possible, then you will never be able to see my friends. This has to happen first, the running as quickly as possible, before this, the apodosis, is fulfilled. So the apodosis we're going to put in the future tense. The protasis the Romans would put either in the future tense or most correctly in the future perfect tense, because the protasis, this action, has to be completed, future perfect, before the future can happen. And you can put the apodosis first and then the protasis first in Latin if you want, or you can flip them. It doesn't really matter. So we'll keep it in the order it is in English. You will never be able to see my friends, the apodosis. So we'll start with you will never be able. We have the never, adverb, which is nunquam. Be able, that's going to be the second person singular, future active indicative. To be able to is possum, posse, potui plus a complementary infinitive. And that complementary infinitive is going to be to see, video, videre, vidi, visus. So the present active infinitive of video, videre. I need to see my friends. So my is going to be meosaum, and then we want the direct object, friends. That needs to be the accusative because it's the direct object. Plural friends, the Latin word for friend is amicus e, masculine. And that makes meosaum, my, also accusative, plural, and masculine. So that's the apodosis. The protasis needs to be introduced by a conjunction. So in the positive, it would be si. The negative is nisi, if not. Nisi, if you do not run. Run is the second person singular. Like I said, we want the future perfect, active indicative of curo, curere, cucurri, cursus. So perfect stem, third principal part, chop off the I, cucur, and then add eris, cucureris. If you do not run as quickly as possible, that's going to be quam plus the superlative to form the super superlative, as blank as possible. Quickly comes from the adjective quick, celer, celeres, celere. The positive would be celeriter, the comparative would be celerius, and the superlative would be celerime, so quam celerime. Altogether, the sentence could say something to the effect of videre meos amicos nunquam poteris, nisi quam celerime cucureris. Optime, sententia secunda. She had not yet seen a more friendly woman than Julia's mother. So she is our subject. She had not yet seen, not yet. So non dum, it's an adverb, it's a compound of non and dum, meaning not yet. Had seen, so she, third person singular, had seen, not yet. Third person singular, pluperfect active indicative of video, videre, vidi, visus. So something like non dum viderat. And we could put an ea in there so that we know that the subject is a she. So ea non dum viderat. She had not seen a more friendly woman than Julia's mother. So what had she not seen? A more friendly woman. So we need, we're going to have woman, femina, I, feminine, the direct object, accusative, so feminon, a woman who is more friendly. Now, though this may look like an adverb with an ly, it's actually the adjective. So we want amicus aum. We want the comparative, more friendly, amicior, The neuter would be amicios, but it's the woman who is more friendly. So amiciorem, we need it to be accusative, singular, and feminine. So ea non dum, ea amiciorem feminam non dum viderat, than Julia's mother. So we're comparing thing X with thing Y. We're comparing a friendly woman, thing X, with thing Y, the mother of Julia. So if thing X is in the accusative, we can use quam plus the superlative. I'm sorry, not quam plus quam, just have mother be the same case as woman. So if woman is accusative, mother will be accusative. So mater, matris, feminine, matrem. And then Julia, I, feminine, we want the genitive Juliae to possess mother. You could also put mother in the ablative of comparison because thing X, woman, is in the accusative case. And the ablative of comparison works if thing X is either nominative or accusative. So you can have two different answers here. One could be something to the effect of a feminam amiciorem quam Juliae matrem nondum viderat, or using the ablative of comparison without quam, we could say feminam amiciorem Juliae matre nondum viderat. Optime. Tertia. After you finish your work, what did you do next? So we have a temporal clause after you finished your work. It's an adverbial clause because it's describing the temporal circumstances of what did you do next after you did this. So this got done. And then what did you do? What did you do next is our main clause. Notice it's an interrogative. We'll be asking a question. What, quid, what did you do next? So after, that'll be post quam. You finished, second person singular. It's going to be the perfect tense, you finished, active indicative of conficio, conficere, confeci, confectus. So confecisti. Post quam confecisti, your work. Tuosa your to agree with either opus operis neuter, and we want the accusative direct object. So tuum opus, or we can use labor, laboris masculine, and we get tuum laborem. Postquam tuum laborem confecisti, or postquam tuum opus confecisti. What did you do next? Interrogative. Quid did you do? This is going to be the second person singular, perfect active indicative of facio, facere, feci, factus, to do. I guess you could use ago if you wanted. That would be egisti. We want fecisti if we use facio. And then next is going to be deinde. Quid deinde fecisti? Quid deinde egisti? Postquam tuum laborem confecisti. Quarta, sententia quarta. The animals on the top of the mountain immediately ran toward the river as soon as they saw the fires. So the animals on the top of the mountain immediately running towards the river, well, our main verb is they ran towards the river. This is our main clause. The animals on top of the mountain immediately ran toward the river. Then we have a temporal clause, a dependent clause, as soon as they saw the fires. Adverbial clause describing when did this action happen? When they ran. As soon as they did this. As soon as they did this, same time as they ran. So our main verb is ran. Who did the running? The animals. They're our subject. Animal. Animalis neuter. Animal. We want the nominative plural neuter. Animalia. Remember that it is an I stem because its nominative ends in al. So animalia. The animals, where were they? They were in plus the ablative of summosaum to agree with mons, montes masculine. So ablative singular masculine in summo monte. Animalia in summo monte, they immediately, adverb, statim, ran, curro, currere, cucurri, cursus, ran, They did it, the animals did it, third person plural, perfect tense, they ran, not runned, they ran, active indicative. So kukuri, third principal part, chop off the I, kukur, and then add erunt, kukurerunt. They ran. Where'd they go? Toward, odd, plus the accusative motion towards. The flumen, fluminous, river, neuter. So that means it's accusative with the same as the nominative. Flumen, odd flumen. When did they do this? As soon as. Simul atque, simul, and then atque, they, video, videre, vidi, visus, third person plural perfect, viderunt, they saw the accusative plural direct object, ignis, ignis masculine, the ignes. You can put the temporal clause first if you would like. In fact, Romans tend to do that. They tend to put the temporal clause before the main clause. Simul atque ignes viderunt, animalia in summo monte, ad flumen statim cucurerunt. Optime. Quinta. As there was danger of war, Caesar led the troops very quickly from Italy into Gaul. As there was a danger of war, you could say since there was a danger of war. This would be a causal clause, showing cause. This is an explanation for why Caesar led the troops very quickly. Why, being an adverb, the answer is an adverb. Why do you do that? Well, because there was a danger of war. Causal, because. This is going to be ut. There was, third person singular imperfect active indicative of sum esse fui futurus, as there was. You could say erat. You could also use the perfect tense, fuit, but fuit would more imply that the danger there once was, it now has passed. So, authorial intent, you decide. Ut fuit or ut erat, danger. Well, what was there? The subject, danger, periculum e neuter. We want the nominative subject, periculum. Ut fuit periculum, ut erat periculum, of war. Belli, genitive singular neuter, of bellum e neuter. Ut fuit periculum belli, ut erat periculum belli. Caesar. You can also have Caesar be the subject, Caesar, and then put the causal clause. Caesar, ut erat periculum belli, he led the troops. Led, duco ducere duxi ductus, third person singular. Duxit, perfect tense, active indicative. Duxit, he led the troops. This is going to be the accusative direct object, plural of copiae aurum, feminine plural. So copias, he duxit copias, and he led them very quickly, adverb, superlative, not just quickly, celeriter, not rather quickly, celerius, but superlative celerime, very quickly, from Italy, ab plus ablative of separation, Italia I feminine, Italia, make pronoun the final A, ab Italia, and into Gaul. In plus the accusative of Gallia I feminine, we want in Galliam. Caesar ut erat periculum belli, copias ab Italia in Galliam calerime duxit. Sexta, sententia sexta. They broke camp at daybreak and marched many miles to the territory of the Romans. So they broke camp at daybreak. So here we have main clause, and they marched many miles. So we have main clause here and main clause here, joined by a conjunction and. So subject is they broke camp. Wow, should have been more careful with it. No, they struck camp. Oh, why'd they hit it? No, as in they moved camp. Latin idiom, castra movere, to move camp. Moveo, movere, movi, motus. The caster part's always the direct object of the verb moveo, to move it, to break it, to strike camp. So we want the third person plural perfect active indicative of moveo, movere, movi, motus. So moverunt. Casra moverunt. When did they do it? At daybreak, at first light. Daybreak, dawn, first light. That is primus aum to agree with lux lucus feminine in the ablative of time when. So it's prima, make run over the final A, luce. Prima luce. And that typically comes first. They like to put time words first to tell you when, to set up the scene, start to paint the picture of what's going on. So, prima luce castra moverunt. Et, and they marched, they made a journey, iter facere, so facio facere feci factus, they made the journey, they marched, third person plural, perfect active indicative, fecerunt, iter fecerunt, and they marched. How far did they march? Many miles, accusative of extent of space, many thousands of paces. A mile is 1,000 paces. They go many thousands of paces. Multa milia passuum, where multa milia is the accusative of extent of space, and passuum is the genitive, partitive genitive. Many thousands of miles, out of the miles, of the paces. Through, per, plus the accusative, motion towards, per, territory. You can either use ager, agri masculine for territory in a legal sense, that would be ager, farmland, or you can use fines finium, the plural of finis, finis masculine, it's always masculine, territory, plural of boundaries. So you can say per fines Romanorum of the genitive plural Romans, per Romanorum fines, per fines Romanorum, or per agrum Romanum. Altogether, prima luce castra moverunt, et per fines Romanorum iter multa milia passum fecerunt. Or you could say an iter per agrum Romanum multa milia passum fecerunt. And septima. On the next night, we remained in the city and watched the games. So on the next night, that's going to be in ablative of time when. Notice it's next. The Romans mean here on the closest night, meaning on the next possible one. So we're going to use the superlative proximus aum to agree with nox noctis feminine in the ablative singular feminine. So proxima nocte. Proxima nocte, on the next night, on the nearest night. On the next night, we remained in the city. So we are the subject, first person plural. We remained, perfect tense, active voice, indicative mood of manea, manere, mansi, mansus. So mansimus. Proxima nocte mansimus. Where did we remain? Ubi eramus. Where were we? In plus the ablative of orbs, orbis, feminine. We were in urbe, in the city. What we do? Et, and we, first person plural, perfect tense, active, indicative of specto, spectare, spectavi, spectatus. We watched, we looked at the ludus e masculine, the accusative plural direct object for game. We want ludos. Ludos spectavimus. Proxima nocte in urbe mansimus et ludos spectavimus. Octava, sententia octava. The Germans were much larger than the Gauls, but the latter fought more bravely. So the Germans, the germs, nominative plural masculine, Germanus aum, so the Germani, they were much larger than the Gauls. They were in the past. Third person plural, imperfect, active, indicative, erant, ipsum esse fui futurus, erant. You can also use fuerunt, they have been, they were at one point, but now no longer are. We're going to use the erant, the imperfect. It's more popular. Germani erant. They were much larger. They were larger, comparative, by what degree of difference? By much. Much larger. Much is going to be the ablative of multosaum. It's going to be multo, singular neuter if you had to further parse it down. So multo, to modify larger. Larger being an adjective, a comparative one modifying the Germans. So larger is going to be magnosaum, large. The comparative is major, maiores. The neuter maios, maioris. The Germans are masculine here and nominative and plural, so maiores. So Germani erant multo maiores than the Gauls. We're comparing thing X, the Germans, the thing Y, the Gauls. If the Germans are thing X and we use quam for than, thing Y, the Gauls, must also be nominative. Gauls, Gallosaum, like Germans, Germanosaum, make it nominative plural masculine, Galli. Germani et Galli. Germani erant multo maiores quam Galli. Now you could also omit quam and use the ablative of comparison for thing Y. Turn Galli into Gallis because thing X is nominative. Could also be accusative. So you could get Germani erant multo maiores Gallis, and it would mean the same thing. But, one T, now that I have your attention, that would be sed, S-E-D, but against expectations, said the latter. Now the latter, that means the later one. That means we've enumerated two people, two groups, or two options. We have Germans and we have Gauls, 1 and 2. Germans, 1, Gauls, 2. There's a former one, that would be the Germans, because they're the firster one. And then there's the Gauls, the latter one, the later one. Here we're referring to the latter one. The Latin word for latter, we use the demonstrative hic haec hoc, because it's closer. It's right here. It's the closer one. The former would be further away. So we use ille, illa, illud to refer to the former, the one that's further back, the firster one. And hic haec hoc is the one that's closer here. But the latter refers to the Gauls, right? So hic haec hoc, we want nominative plural masculine. Said he, hi, he, referring to the Gauls, they fought, third person plural perfect active indicative of pugno, pugnare, pugnavi, pugnatus, so pugnaverunt. They fought how? Adverb more bravely. Not just bravely, but the adverb more modifies the adverb bravely, because remember, adverbs modify adverbs. Fought more bravely. So not just fortiter, but fortius. Fortius pugnaverunt. Said he, fortius pugnaverunt. Altogether, Germani erant multo maiores quam Galli, or get rid of quam and write Gallis. Sed he, fortius pugnaverunt. Or if we're saying that the Germans were much larger for a long period of time than the Gauls, but the latter were at the same time fighting for a long time more bravely, you could use the imperfect for fought and say pugnabant instead of pugnaverunt, the perfect. Both are okay. Nona. A few days later, the right wing of our army easily forced the enemy to leave the camp. Oh, how jolly good for you. So a few days later, that's going to be later. Hear the comparative in there? Not just late, but later comparative. By a few days. By the degree of a few days. By how much is it later? A few days in the ablative. So we want the ablative of pauci ia and dies a masculine. Paucis diebus and later. It's going to be after. That's going to be post. Paucis post diebus, and you often see it in that word order with the adjective and then the post and then the noun. Remember, this could also work with ante. That would be a few days earlier. Ante, a few days before. Paucis ante diebus would be a few days earlier. Remember, about few days here, ablative of degree of difference. Paucis diebus. Paucis post diebus. The right wing of our army. So the right wing, the wing of our army, which is the right. We could say dexter, dextra, dextrum, and then cornu. So we can say dextrum cornu. Our army, you don't really need army here because the wing is implied. The army is implied in the cornu, the wing of our army. So you could say dextrum cornu nostrum, our right wing. Easily forced. Easily is an adverb. That positive adverb form is just facile, just the accusative. It's not faciliter, it's facile. Forced or compelled, kogo, kogere, coegi, coactus. The subject accusative enemy, hostes, from hostis, hostis masculine, to do the objective infinitive, to leave, to quit the camp. You can use relinquo, relinquere, reliqui, relictus, present active infinitive, relinquere. And then that takes an accusative direct object because it's a transitive verb. Camp is going to be castra, always neuter, always plural. So the wing, third person singular, coagit, force the hostes, subject accusative, to relinquere the castra. Now, if you didn't use relinquo for to leave, and you used force the enemy to discedere or excedere, those are intransitive verbs, and they take a preposition, either ab, de, or ex, plus the ablative to show separation. So if you coagit the hostes to discedere or excedere a castris, de castris, e castris. Those verbs discedere and excedere are not transitive. They don't take an accusative direct object. They are intransitive. Relinquo is a transitive verb and takes an accusative direct object, so castra is just fine. And then decima. Our commander ought to wage war as fiercely as possible. So commander, he belongs to us. Noster, nostra, nostrum, to agree with imperator, imperators, masculine. So noster imperator, or imperator noster. He ought to wage. Ought is debeo, debere, debui, debitus. If it means ought, it takes a complementary infinitive to ought to do something. To wage war is the idiom bellum gerere. So bellum will be the direct object of gerere. You don't have to change anything because we're looking for the present active infinitive of gero, gerere. It's gerere. So imperator noster, bellum gerere debet. He ought in the present tense to wage war. How? In what way? Adverb. Super superlative, as fiercely as possible. Quam plus the superlative of acer, acris, acre. We want the superlative. It will be acerrime, quam acerrime. Imperator noster, bellum quam acerrime gerere debet. Optime, very well done. That concludes exercise C and chapter 36. You are now ready to move on to review 9, lessons 33 through 36.